And whether you've used the Miro platform before, if you want some support, we can provide this in the chat, and we'll keep resharing the Miro link for those who are just joining. Kim, Eva, if you can please keep doing that, that would be great. Okay. I might make a start, given that we're 4 minutes in. As people keep coming in, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll keep supporting you throughout the session, so don't worry if you've joined late. So welcome to this session, a regenerative approaches for systems change. This was actually a part 2 series. We ran the first part on the 14th of May. Some of you may have been with us. Don't worry if you haven't. We recorded the session. It's available on YouTube. And we also have a summary here on the Miro board where you can see some of the resources and insights that were shared in that session that you can use for inspiration for this session as well. I'm Diljana. I also go by D, and I'll be the main host and facilitator for this session, holding space for you. And I want to emphasize that this is a session we are running in collaboration between the Systems Innovation Network and the Environment Hub within that network, also together with the FITO network. And this is part of the Networks Festival. And some of you might have joined and found out about this session through this. We're really excited about this collaboration. And I want to give you a brief introduction of everyone who's been involved in this process. If you don't mind giving us a quick wave on cameras when I go through this. So from the Systems Innovation Network, we have our team members, Eva Valencia and Kim Zelberg. If you give us a quick wave, Eva and
Hello.
Kim.
Hello.
Thank you. Kim is the one who produced this beautiful Miro board we'll be using today. Thanks so much for this, Kim. And Eva has been coordinating and weaving this beautiful collaboration with the Network Festival, the FITO Network, and with Hajar, who's going to be sharing some of her amazing work in this regenerative space. So thank you so much for this, Eva. Really appreciate all these connections and all this work. And then we have our session weavers and our guests from the FITO network and these introductions and collaborations that emerged from this space. Hajar Tazi is a holistic thinker, network weaver, storyteller, systems transformation catalyst at the surface of planetary well-being. I love the sound of that, Hajar. And you'll hear a bit more about her work in this session. Thanks for the nice wave. And we also have Adrian Robke with us, the co-founder of the FITO network, weaving impact networks to co-create systems change. Adrian is also going to be our keynote listener in this space, and I love this format. He will have a dedicated slot at the end of the session to share what he's heard, the reflections, the summaries, some key insights at the end. Thanks so much for that, Adrian. Brilliant. For those of you who just joined, as I said, if you're new to Miro, if you want some support, please mention this in the chat. If you also struggle to contribute on the Miro board, if you're on your phone or on the go, Eva and Kim can take your input from the chat and we can transfer it to the Miro board. So that's also a great way to contribute. No pressure at all. So the purpose of this session really is to co-create a regenerative approaches compass. This will become a lot more clear as we go through some of these sessions. But at the end, I really want to emphasize that everyone is welcome to add their bio and their photos here if you want to be fully acknowledged as a co-creator in this space. This would all remain open source. It would remain on the Miro board. If you feel comfortable to acknowledge your contributions, please come back to this and add your information here. So we'll start with a bit of a warm-up. I'm skipping the part here, which is summarizing our previous session from the 14th of May. This is here for you. There's a recording, an incredible source of information and resources from the speakers that we had at the time. And I would invite you all to come to the welcome and warm-up exercise session here on the Miro board. If you get lost, you can also click on my face here at the right top corner, and you can find where I am on the Miro board. That's an easy way to navigate. And we'll go through these like very quick exercises. There's a couple of polls, 3 polls here to share a bit more about your understanding of regenerative practices, your experience with them, anything else you would like to share. You can drag a dot here on the map to show us where you're based, and so that we can get a big picture representation of where we are all joining from today visually. And then at the end, I would love to know what regeneration means to you. And you're welcome to capture this in the form of definitions, questions, one-word metaphors, kind of open questions you're holding. feel free to treat that as a rough brainstorm to start us with. We'll have 5 minutes for this. I'll have a quick timer. This will be a kind of solo quiet exercise. So I'll leave you to it, and any questions, please let us know in the chat. I hope that's clear. Thanks, everyone. We're in the last half a minute now, so if you'd like to add some final post-its in what regeneration means to you, either in the chat on the mirror board, that would be great.
Yeah, we also have 7 responses for the polls. So if you haven't answered the polls, you can please do that. It's really nice to get a sense of the whole group.
I'm seeing the final post-its. Please feel free to finish this. I think also a couple of people just joined. Could we please put the mirror link in the chat? Oh, Elisa, the poll is at the top of the map. You can see the 3 polls just up here. Is everyone with us? I think we've addressed some of the mirror issues in the chat. Please do shout if not. Hi, Susan. Thank you for sharing that. Please feel free to add your contributions in the chat and we can transfer these to the mirror board. And hopefully you can see the prompts on the screen. Beautiful, thank you. Eva, Kim, is that okay if we keep transferring? Thanks, Eva.
Yeah, of course.
Brilliant. And Kim, we can see the results of the poll?
Yes, there we go.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, what motivates us to join the session? We have a lot of deepening on your learning and understanding, which I think is really, really spot on for what we're going to hear from Hajar and how we're going to then contribute and co-create on the back of that, contributing to the field of regeneration, connecting with like-minded individuals. Which area of regenerative approaches are you most drawn to? Regenerative economy and finance, regenerative culture, and others. I wonder if we have some post-its on the others. Feel free to share that. And the current experience with regenerative practices, it's a great mix around beginners, intermediate, advanced, and experts. So that's really great to see as well. And a wonderful distribution on the map. It's great to see all of our friends and relatives from different time zones and different areas in the world. So welcome and thank you for making it work with all the different time zones that are represented. I wonder if anyone wants to share and come off mute and share a bit more of what regeneration means to them from some of the posts that we hear on some of the comments in the chat that perhaps you were not able to add to post-its. I would love to add some flavor on the things we see on the post-its here.
I think regeneration is the idealist stands to what complexity is the materialist stand. Quite similar, trying to see how the world works and trying to calibrate yourself to it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I hear there as well this interaction between the self and the world and that interconnectedness in it as well. Anyone else would like to share? Kind of bring some flavor to what they shared on what regeneration means to you. Okay, I'll take this as a silence that I will share some of the things that really stood out to me from the post-its, and we have the opportunity to kind of digest what everybody has written in the next exercise and actually work with these post-its and see how they align on some of the framework and the work that Hajar has developed. But I really love that co-creating with nature really stood out to me, the purple post-its, the healing separation, and I've seen some people adding stars as well, tending to the life that flows through and around us. I think I will now hand over to Hajar to hear a bit more about the layers, if we may call them that, of regeneration. And then we'll come and use some of that work. So do pay attention, feel free to ask clarifying questions because we'll work with that framework directly in the next exercise. Over to you, Hajar.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, to the C Network and the FIDO Network for the invitation to join you today. It was a real joy to co-create the session with the team and a pleasure to be with all of you today. And I also want to thank you all for the meaningful work that you are doing to midwife the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And so today, to get us started, I'd like to just share two icebergs. This is the first one that kind of offer a window into the deeper, often neglected drivers of the polycrisis and the Great Unraveling. So the Great Unraveling refers to the social-ecological breakdown that we're currently witnessing. And iceberg models are really a great way to help us make sense of what we're witnessing in the world, what's visible. So this is what is beyond the surface, but also to make sense of what lies beneath the surface, which we often neglect. And so this first iceberg at the surface shows the sort of events that we're currently witnessing, from extreme weather events to economic crises, political instability, mental health and spiritual crisis, which is really a crisis of meaning and belonging, social unrest, etc. And these are really the symptoms of the polycrisis or the meta-crisis. But like all icebergs, most of what drives these symptoms lies beneath the surface. And so beneath the surface, we have patterns and trends. So the long unraveling of trust in institutions, increasing inequalities, technological displacement, the breaching of our planetary boundaries, the erosion of social cohesion, and so on. And deeper still lie the structures that sort of underpin these patterns and trends and give rise to these events. So these include our globalized, growth-dependent economies, extractive technologies, and systems that institutionalize and promote competition, and also fragmentation and disconnection from the self, each other, and nature. And these systems are built upon something that is even deeper, which are our collective models and our worldviews. So these includes beliefs like human exceptionalism, survival of the fittest, and the myth that we are separate from each other and from nature. And at the very base of the iceberg, we actually find the ontological and mythological foundations. So these are the stories that we've been told ever since we were children that have conditioned us to see the world through the prism of separation, to really see science and rational thinking as being on a pedestal compared to other ways of knowing, such as intuition, ritual, reverence, all the other ways of knowing that allow us to profoundly commune with one another in nature. And again, we find the separation myth, this idea that the world, the earth, is inert matter, and which gives us, the right to exploit it, that life is not sacred, that time is linear, and that we as human beings are masters of nature. And so this is the first iceberg, kind of depicting the state of the world. And the second one, if you can, Diliana, just switch. Thank you so much. Yeah, so the second one is a vision of the Great Turning. And these are the words of wonderful environmental activist Joanna Macy, who initiated the work that reconnects. I would wholeheartedly recommend checking out her work. And so the Great Turning is already happening. And this is really the key, if there's one key takeaway from this session, it is that everything we're seeing here on this iceberg is already taking place. These seeds are already emerging everywhere around the world. And our task as regenerative practitioners is to notice where these seeds are emerging and to nourish them with care, love, and patience. And so at the top, we see the well-being of people and planet, the flourishing of the commons, community-led governance, ecological regeneration, solidarity, kinship, and resilient localized economies. And underneath that, we find patterns of care and mutual aid, of biophilic design, of intercultural solidarity and kinship, and of distributed leadership and trust and emergence. We see structures as well that are aligned with life, that are life-centered. And so these include collaborative systems, need-based economies, community-owned technologies, knowledge commons, which means the free flow of knowledge and also resources. And these too are rooted in deeper beliefs and stories. Here, we see that the mental models are radically different. Ubuntu, I am because we are. Again, trust in abundance, regenerative coexistence, prioritizing care over control. Buen vivir, which means, seeing well-being as being non-linear and multidimensional. Seeing also our role as being earth stewards and nature as being really at the core of our very identity and essence as human beings, as well as multi-species justice and kinship. And here, when we get to the mythological foundations, the earth is no longer inert. It becomes a living, breathing entity of which we are mere expressions and parts, organisms of the larger body of the earth. Time is no longer linear, it is spiral, and truth is no longer abstract, it is lived and embodied, and it is deeply relational. And at the base of this iceberg lies a sacred ontology, a worldview that recognizes that we are all one, that we are all interdependent, and that we are all here as expressions of nature rather than mass.
Awareness iceberg.
And so, yeah, I guess I'll just stop here and inviting questions if any of you has any or comments or really any reactions.
I'll just comment. This is Tracy. I think this is a beautiful piece of work. Took a lot of effort to pull so many threads together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is Tony here. Also, I find the structure very helpful. I think the difference between the great turning and the great unraveling is that the great turning needs to be scaled a bit more. That's why we're here today.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, indeed. Yes, Caesar?
Hi, Hajara. Thank you for showing this wonderful work. I'm curious about how do you balance the connection between the great turning and the great unraveling from, for example, the perspective of how our sense and sense-making capabilities are connected to, are connecting actually both of them, right? So the kind of meta-crisis perspective instead of polycrisis. And how this, of course, informs regeneration.
Yes, thank you, Caesar, for this question. I really love the metaphor of the doula. The doula does not have just one task, it has two of them. She is a figure who is here to assist in great periods of transitions, both in periods of death and of composting and hospicing, and also to midwife new possibilities. And I really see my personal, life calling as being that of a doula, to help hospice the great unraveling and really the sort of core mythologies and ontologies that underpin the great unraveling, and to nourish again the seeds for the great turning. And of course, the great unraveling lives within us. And so the work of hospicing modernity, hospicing coloniality, hospicing separation is a work that all of us have to also, tend to in our inner ecologies, not only in the external world.
Yeah, Federico?
Yeah, thanks. I would be curious in thinking, how can we approach these ideas in a way to integrate, to integrate and transcend the ideas that are right now guiding our system. I think we think in a way that it's either or, is from the ideas right now to the new ideas that you're proposing. And especially in the mental models, and in it has to do with a more ontological and mythological foundations. For a lot of people on this planet, it's going to be really, really challenging to try to move from one place to another. So how can we approach this and include and transcend, include these traditional mental models and transcend them, but not oppose them? If we try to oppose them, I think we're only gonna, or if we offer this as a new ideology, I think we are only gonna create more backlash to these new ideas.
Yes, thank you so much, Federico. And I'd love to also invite your own, to other participants, if you have any answers to these questions. I really do not come here as an expert, but also as a learner and an unlearner. And I love living the questions much more than answering them. And my sense is that I really share, your concern with trying to force upon people another way of being or experiencing the world, or other ways of knowing. In a sense, this is what has led us where we are today. And so I feel like really the core of my practice, at least, is to co-create spaces where we can begin to relate to one another and to our more than human kin in different ways. So it's really experiential. It's not about convincing someone from the cognitive mind, but much more creating opportunities to rise beyond the cognitive mind, beyond truth and falsehood, into the space where we can start really feeling that sense of kinship with one another and with the earth.
Thanks.
All right, I think we should move on to the next one, considering the time. Yeah.
I'm keeping Kim, and thank you so much, Hajar, and thank you for all of the questions. Nazir, is it a quick one? Sorry, I didn't mean to. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. I will make up the time.
I was going to just say that I think one of the things in common between the hospicing and the great turning is that there are some skills that I think we have to build on. It's not like a disruption in the sense of denying everything from the past and going on to something, creating something new. And some of the skills of sort of bidding farewell and establishing the welcome are probably some things in common, right? And so I would love to sort of get some thoughts from Hajar and others on that, what is our essence of it, both which both allows the hospicing and the welcoming, if you will, of the new creation.
What a beautiful question. Thank you so much, Nazir. And again, welcoming, your sharings in the chat for everybody. Again, coming back to just the figure of the doula, I think the core skill is care. Even the hospicing work is extremely difficult. I have experienced it in my own inner world. And so to do that with compassion, as if, holding a mother holding her child, holding those parts of ourselves that are still attached to the old paradigm with patience, and knowing that with time, they will slowly start to be composted and something else can rise in their place.
Thank you.
So beautiful and so powerful. I will gently move us on this note. I have to say, I'm also really touched by this discussion. So I'm putting back this facilitator hat on because I was genuinely really drawn into it. So we're going to have an opportunity now to build on what Hajar just shared. And I will invite the sense of care and curiosity and compassion when we do that. The invitation here is to look at some of the initial ideas we generated here when we asked what regeneration means to you. And the first part of the invitation is to take some of these post-its, or all of them, and have an attempt to actually position them on the iceberg and see whether they speak to some of these layers and levels in the iceberg. Do some of them refer more to the event, to the surface? Are some of them already going very deep here into the mental models, for example, or the mythological foundation? And there's no kind of, we don't have to do this perfectly, and it's an initial kind of inquiry, I would say, of how we position these post-its and why we are positioning them there. And the second part of the invitation is to generate new ones, new ideas. What has this sparked for you? They can all be open questions as well, and unfinished ideas. Feel free to put these on the post-its and position them on this iceberg, kind of holding what Hajar just shared about these different layers as well. I think we'll have probably, is it 5 minutes for this, Kim? We'll have a timer for this.
Yeah, 4 minutes,
this
around 4 minutes.
activity.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're at time, so I invite finishing up the final post-its. And the initial reflection I had just watching these populate, we really started from the deeper end. It seems that the iceberg was getting filled from the bottom up. And I think that's also beautiful for some of that intention initially in the poll, that people were looking for that deepening and the deep understanding. And And another kind of invitation I want to add here is when we talk about a compass, that would be the next exercise we'll do together. We can think about the compass as this mechanistic thing and being on a ship, and a ship that sails at the surface of the waters. But really here, there's also an invitation to think about the natural world and animals that have an inner compass that navigate complex ocean currents. So we're thinking about a diving animal that is navigating the depths of this ocean. So a compass in all of its meanings. Again, I would invite any reflections or anyone who wants to comment on some of the posts perhaps that they put, where they put them, or the overall picture of this iceberg that we've now generated on the back of what Haja shared with us, including you, Haja. If you do want to reflect on seeing this build on your work, you're very welcome to. Okay, I will accept the silence. Okay, I will move us on then to the next exercise. Again, we'll keep digesting and reflecting on these ideas, and we can use them when we think about the compass. So stay with them, come back to them, and we will have breakout sessions in the end as well, so we can go deeper into smaller groups. Perhaps that might be easier as well. Haja, I'll come back to you. We would love to hear the next offer, this really generous offer that you started developing with all of the in-depth understanding of regeneration that you've been developing in your learning and unlearning journey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dee. And I just really wanted to quickly, comment on what I'm witnessing here, and just share with you all that all of my work is, sort of knowledge commons. It's available to all for free on the one hand, and on the second hand, it is a living. Everything is a living model and framework, recognizing also the limited nature of frameworks in general and how unable they are to capture the complexity of reality. But everything people have shared with me on LinkedIn when I have shared these frameworks has been incorporated. So deep, deep gratitude to all of you for taking the time to engage in co-inquiry and collective sense-making and wayfinding. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Haja. Shall I put this on the screen? Is that okay?
So we can be adding things to it later on as well, right? After the session, or
Yes,
should I not tinker with it after?
definitely. Yeah, the board will be live and it will go on, so you can just come back to it and add any material. That would be really, really nice. So please do that. Thank you.
Done.
All right. So what must we unlearn, remember, and embody to regenerate life? The second leg of our learning and unlearning journey begins not with answers, but with this question. And again, this framework is not comprehensive at all. These are just ideas that I have woven together throughout the past few years as I have continued to learn and unlearn. And your inputs and suggestions are welcomed with an open mind and an open heart. And so this framework really invites us to meet this moment of planetary unraveling with humility, with courage, with imagination, and not just by acquiring new skills, but by undergoing a deeper transformation of ourselves, of our worldviews, of our values, and most importantly, of our ways of relating with ourselves, each other, and nature. And so this journey is, it unfolds really in 4 interwoven movements. The first one, we are invited to remembering our role and place and reconnecting with the sacred. So remembering the earth as a living, breathing entity and as inherently and inalienably sacred. Remembering life as relational, and remembering ourselves as part of an ancient web of kinship. And so this is really a space to reconnect with ancestral wisdom, with the more than human world and the spiritual dimension of ecology. Through ritual, reverence, deep listening, it is an invitation to explore purpose, not as a personal ambition, like we have been taught to see purpose, but as a sacred duty to this earth and to this wider cosmos that we're a part of. And it's also an invitation to consider our unique role in this period of great transition, and to really uncover what our unique gift is to offer to the world in this moment of planetary unraveling, and to also determine what is my inner compass for this moment of great unraveling. What are the values that guide my steps? And to really seek to embody those. And the second movement of this unlearning and learning journey is seeing with new eyes, perceiving systems, patterns, and possibilities. So once we've really rooted ourselves back into the sacred earth, we open our eyes and see in a different way. So this arc explores living systems thinking, regenerative economies, governance for the common good. It encourages us to really unlearn inherited worldviews and assumptions of progress, of control, of linearity of time that stem from modernity, from coloniality, and to engage instead in reimagining the world, in future envisioning, in narrative transformation. Storytelling really plays a core role in this era. I believe, that the ability to engage in myth making is actually akin to world birthing, and to reorient our ethical framework. And so really this particular arc is about perceiving patterns, recognizing interdependence, and cultivating the radical imagination that is needed to restory our world. Then we turn to designing as life for life and shift from insight to more of embodiment. Sorry, my dog is getting a little bit excited in the background. And so here we learn how to design systems that really mimic the way living systems operate and flourish. And when we talk about systems, they're ecological, economic, social. And so we explore permaculture, mutual aid, crisis adaptation, bioregional innovation. We explore how to support communities in cultivating resilience and the capacity to respond, or as we may call it, responsibility, not through top-down models, the traditional ones, but through participatory experimentation. So really here we're called to establish living laboratories where we test and adapt innovations, weaving together ancestral wisdom and modern scientific discoveries. And for the last arc of the learning unlearning journey, becoming life affirming, tending to personal and collective healing and flourishing. And so really the question here is, who do we need to become to truly serve and regenerate life? And so this is really the space of inner work, of tending to trauma, grief, and developing personal and collective resilience. It is about embodying the ethics of regeneration in how we lead, how we relate, and how we respond together. And so it's really about cultural healing, and also revaluing other ways of knowing through art-based approaches, through deep ecology, and through the cultivation of inner coherence. So we're hearing a lot the talk about islands of coherence in a sea of chaos, which have the ability to bring the entire system to a higher state of coherence. And so this arc is about becoming an island of coherence, so that our actions can emerge from alignment instead of urgency. As Bayo Akomolafe famously said, times are urgent, let us slow down. And so here we're called to slow down and to tend to our inner ecologies, to our relational web that bind us with each other and with the living earth. And so I guess I will again, stop here now and invite questions if you have any or comments. And also I'm checking out the chat to see if anything came up.
Yeah, I see Tracy has written something around the paradigm of good and bad. I think that's pretty interesting that we tend to sort of place, this is good, this is bad, right? And this is tied to the value structures that we have, which are subjective. So, maybe Tracy, if you would like to elaborate on that, because I think it's an important point.
Sure. That was in response to the paradigm shifts and the moving toward, moving what we're hospicing and what we are midwifing. So for me, what the comment that I put in the chat is just that as I've been learning about and healing my own trauma, I don't find that it's useful to reject myself and how I was at different stages in my life. I find it more useful to recognize that I was responding to certain contexts and that response was intelligent. The way my coping strategies were intelligent for that context, and that now that I'm in a different context, I have choices about those strategies. And some of those strategies I used in the past really don't work for me. And they're not actually bringing me closer to meeting my needs and finding my joy and my purpose, right? These coping strategies actually might be really undermining like my sense of purpose, like in the current context. So now I'm looking and learning, right? And relearning ways of being that, are actually more effective in meeting my needs and my purposes. So that's what I was sharing in the chat. Thanks for the invitation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tracy. And yes, it is very easy to fall into, this sort of polarities and very easy, this is good, this is bad. So I really, really appreciate you introducing this additional layer of complexity. And I would tend to, totally agree. Thinking about it even on the collective level, I mean, capitalism, colonialism, some might see this looking at the larger arc or spiral of human history as something very important that has played an important role in the evolution of humanity and the evolution of consciousness. But it is something that we are called to compost at this very stage. And again, with care and compassion, and not by rejecting these sides of us and pushing them into the shadow because they lurk in the shadow and they only keep growing, but to shed a compassionate light on them. And again, with patience, help dissolve the effect that they still hold on us.
And Liza, please feel free to unmute.
Hi. Thank you so much for sharing. I find this resonates deeply. And what I'm going to say now is going to sound a bit controversial. So I need to premise it with the fact that, so we've been working with a community of folks specifically within the Middle Eastern context or the Kuwaiti context on designing an event that is all about how do we promote more regenerative systems and practices that are locally rooted, grounded, and what are the narratives that resonate with folks. We've been doing a lot of interviews with people, seeing like what connects, what doesn't, and so on. And one of the things that has come up from all this ideation and thinking and interviewing is that a lot of folks, including people within my team, feel that some of the language used around this feels a little bit like, and again, it's going to be controversial. I apologize in advance, that it's fetishizing indigeneity and like this idea of the past and indigenous culture and the connection to nature and nature itself. And that might be based on specific understandings of specific indigenous communities, maybe more so in America, Latin America, perhaps Asia, but so people in the Middle East were telling us, like, we do not have, or in Europe, we've never had this like sacred connection to nature. We've always used it to the maximum of our capacity. And that at that time, our capacity to destroy nature in the way that we used it was more limited, but it was not like inherently, there was not a deeper, greater connection between us and nature. And nature itself can be brutal. So this vision of nature as inherently positive or something that brings good, also was, people were having trouble connecting with that, or with this idea that going back, the part of regenerative, like understanding all the oppression, inequality that has always existed in every single culture, in every single period of time in the world. So this idea of going back is going to get us somewhere inherently good was something that was also being questioned. So I just wanted to throw that out there and see if you had any thoughts related to that, Hajat.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing this additional layer of complexity. And of course, the language that I use is simply the language that my heart sings, and is not a universal language, and it is not for everybody. And I know that it does not resonate with lots of people for the reasons that you mentioned. And yes, it is very interesting to explore this sort of romanticized vision of nature and romanticized vision of indigenous cultures as well. And here, I mean, I don't know if you noticed, there is no mention at all of, indigenous. It's more ancestral wisdom. And so that comes from Eastern spirituality and, even ancestral Islamic traditions. You mentioned the Middle East, which really posits that our relationship with nature has to be one of reverence, and that we were in a way gifted nature to steward it. And so I do sense as though there is, a need, and it came up in the chat as well earlier, that it is important to also nourish a pluriverse, not a sort of unique story of this is how we will get to the more beautiful world our heart knows is possible, but to really be open to many ways. And, this is also at the core of the iceberg model, many ways of knowing, many different ways of perceiving the world and inhabiting the world. And in a sense, this is what happened with modernity and coloniality, that many, many ways of being in relationship with one another in the earth were erased through colonialism. And so I really hear what you're saying. And the idea is not to rise to a state of the world where there is no more violence, there is no more, but to kind of recognize that as we are journeying towards the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, to recognize that hurting each other or hurting our more than human kin is really akin to hurting ourselves. And I know that many people in many places in the world are not yet, ready to kind of feel into this. But it is, again, the language that I use and my very limited subjective perspective that I was able to share. Yes.
Yeah, Federico.
Yeah, I resonate with this last comment because I think there's quite a few narratives within the regeneration movement that they have this type of superficiality, like the one that was just shared right now with the indigenous cultures. But also a lot of like a position where that's the ultimate truth and maybe the only. And I know it's not intended to be that way, but I think it filtrates that way. And I've been following the regenerative model movement for a while now. And although it's beautiful and the mental models and logical foundation they share with us are really brilliant. And yeah, we would all like to move there. But we, in order to enable systemic change, that would be the ideal to move the mental models. But it's the right path. Is there another path where we can incorporate all mental models and do a transformation from there? Because for some reason, regeneration starts to feel more like an ideology and maybe even a new religion than a proposal that includes all types of worldviews. Yeah, that's my thought.
Sorry, I don't know if this is just an issue from my end, but I wasn't able to hear everything. The sound was a little bit muffled. So yeah, just inviting anyone who was able to hear to maybe respond to that.
I would like also to respond, and I hear also Federico. What he was saying was that it seems that regeneration is turning into an ideology or a religion even, no? And how can we do, and well, that's what he said, but answering to him, I think also it is important indeed to see the different levels of the icebergs from events to mindsets, but that doesn't mean that there is only one, right? So how to not be, again, like be regenerative and exclusive, putting out only mindset or only ideology, and how can we also put it into practice, and how can we put different ideas together, that we are not only one idea of what good means, but different ideas of how to regenerate, nurture in a way that both people and nature can do it. Just please.
I just want to speak to Frederico's interesting point there. I kind of sense that myself also. And I guess what I would say is that it kind of has to be grounded in a reality of the understanding of systems and what really makes them regenerative. I think things become ideologies when they become disconnected from the reality of the world, right? And they become caught up in just the terminology and so forth, and disconnected from what's actually making something regenerative, what's the system's dynamics behind that. So I'm a little bit in your camp, Federico, worried that it might become an ideology, or it is becoming an ideology if it becomes disconnected from the question of what really actually makes a system regenerative, whether it's in any context, really. You know, it can be in a relationship, in a family, in a community, and in a business, in you know, a socio-ecological system. So I think getting closer to that would help us get further away from it becoming an ideology where we just share words without understanding what it means.
Yeah, and I want to just very quickly add on to that I feel as though regeneration, when it is not rooted in the local biocultural ecosystem, it's just another idea or another ideology. And I think that this is really the call of regeneration and bioregionalism. It has to have unique expressions that are actually expressions of the biocultural ecosystem in which it emerges. And I think this is how we also reconcile this question of unity and diversity. Regeneration is not here to erase differences. This is what we're, in a sense, trying to move beyond. And so I really see regeneration, when it is unrooted, as just another concept that does risk to erase pluralistic ways of knowing and being.
So on LinkedIn, there was this conversation about regeneration. that the word was losing its track. Like the word had gotten so popular that now people were using it as a marketing or a catchphrase in their title or something or the other. And I was in this horde of gathering all those people who meant it the way I meant it before the whole populace took that name. And then I lost context of it. And then I started adding more people and more people into my LinkedIn profile, not just those people who resonated with that term, but just who latched on to that word. So, no, yearning for that word and reaching there is one thing. And sometimes words do help us, is what I'm saying, that we might come to the same conclusions through such biocultural differences, but we come to the same substance somehow. And then there are others who just pick it up without really yearning for it.
Please, Cesar.
Go ahead, Caesar.
Hi, and just sort of soaking in everything that has been said. I think that to me, there is an important connection to the way we define nature and the cosmology where this comes from, and how this is connected to whether regeneration is only farming type of farming, right? Or regeneration really goes into different layers, and how this connects with these different layers. I think, as it has been previously mentioned, there's a lot of people connecting with regeneration because it has an element of sense making for some. And this, of course, comes with cultures that have been deeply impacted by modernism, which is very disconnecting and isolationist. But at the same time, I feel that there is also a lack of acknowledgement of how purity is an issue, and how there is no indigenous perspective, right? There's different worldviews, and each of these worldviews have different definitions of systemic and what a system is and how to influence a system. Because many of what we see contemporarily, from the Nella Meadows to now, it's a modernist approach to systems. Still very academic, still very deductive, taken from many other places of wisdoms and cosmologies, but not clear on how to embody them because of the lack of belonging. I think this is something that Hajar mentioned in terms of biocultures, which is an approach that I really value. But again, it connects to me with the problematization of purity, right? There's no bioregion that has not been affected by modernity. And this is something that we have to navigate as well, right? So I think that's it's part of, to me, what makes regeneration such a complicated topic and concept to approach, and why it's not only environmental, right? So why it also becomes socio-environmental, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Caesar. We'll come to you, Uma. I just want to say we're going to restructure a little bit the final part of the session because I love the energy that's coming in this discussion. So we won't go into breakouts. I think we'll stay here as plenary. So Uma, we'll come to you. Please share all the reflections and contributions you want to make. And then I would offer the prompt on the back of that of how we might think about bringing this into our daily lives, where we are in the world, as the final discussion prompt. And then we'll start wrapping up. Uma, please go ahead.
Thank you for the time. So as we were discussing, there is something that
that really resonated with me, and I saw a parallel in the work that I do. So right now, regeneration is not really facing a huge backlash. It's sort of, we're building momentum, etc. But I come from the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I remember I've been doing this work since the early 2000s. And there was much appetite for it. People saw the benefit of it. It's about equity, inclusion, increasing participation in whatever sphere. As you know, in North America, there is like a huge backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think what has happened is people have become very religious about it and what it means and what it doesn't. And it didn't give people enough inclusivity and for them to define what it means for them. People would basically exclude people who didn't have the right language and they weren't, they would basically cancel somebody if they didn't subscribe to their particular point of view. And I think that is what contributed to the backlash that is happening right now. And I think I would just express a word of caution that as we talk about regeneration, we make it such that it's inclusive for people to join at different points. Somebody raised the point about good and bad, and it seems as though there's it's either you're good or you're bad. Be a bit more inclusive for people to enter into the conversation. And then they can work their way up to what really resonates for them with regard to inclusion. And even as we talk about it, have a very inclusive definition of what it is and what it could be, so that I would hate for, people to say regeneration is bad and sort of cancel it from discussions. I just wanted to point out that I'm seeing a parallel for the DEI work.
Thank you. Go ahead. I saw a hand just go up, so please feel free to go ahead if you wanted to respond to that. Yes, sound well.
So what I was saying is, the thing is, there is a source for the whole regenerative work in organizational change. And it is coming out of a lot of trial and error. And now people are just picking it up as a catchphrase, and running along with it. Similarly, DEI had a root, as I've learned to understand it, had a root in multinational corporations, going into third world countries, second world countries, whatever it may be, if there are second world countries, and where the middle management was failing because there was a cultural disharmony. So there are two types of DEI as well. The one that you were talking to, Umaji, initially is one, and the second is where it arose initially, where this became the intentionality of patchworking what was failing in this globalized world. And regeneration, the way it is really meant to be, being discounted is an issue because the deeper essence of the work that is there inside it, those processes that might look like religion, but which have such level of, but religion has power, it is because it's experimented by years and years of hard work and trial and error. There's something called phenomenology that's so deeply embedded in the work of Carol Sanford and Regenesis, which will give you this synergizing power of the mind that you will be able to distance yourself from such colonial constructs that you cannot even imagine doing it any other way that easily. But it's very hard work, but it's made easy. And still it's hard.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Nazir, I think you had hand up and then lowered it. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and as I'm hearing it, or at least comprehending it, perceiving it in this conversation, is that we are probably maybe slightly over focusing on the terms rather than the meaning. And I think that one way of thinking about it might be how would regeneration, or that taking a regeneration lens, and I think of it as a lens rather than a prescription, how would it change how we approach the things we care about? I think might be a sort of a way of thinking that does regeneration even, how do we apply it? And again, we will find myriad ways in which it gets applied. But I think it might bring some tangibility to our thinking, because I do worry that we're getting into maybe potentially a conceptual maze otherwise. Precisely on something where we are really trying to leave it in some sense not ambiguous in the strict sense, but actually creating a mosaic or creating a canvas rather than creating the frame around it. I think we should think more about the canvas than the frame, if you will.
Thank you, Nazir. Maybe if I build on the canvas and mosaic, I would like to offer, perhaps for another 3-4 minutes as we stay in plenary in this discussion, building on this really generative conversation, the offer is to think about how we start applying regenerative practices in our daily lives, where we currently are. I would love to hear some initial examples or questions or kind of these unfinished thoughts of how you might start doing that in practice. So we move into this tangible space in your own language, in the current context, whatever the words feel right for you. That will be the final prompt. And then we'll come to you, Adrian, for a share back. Would anyone like to kick us off on how this could be applied in a daily life?
And I saw that there were already, in fact, 2 ideas, no? Like one was to create an inclusive meaning, not to put the scope, the frame, but really to open it. And another one was also to create a dialogue, to use it as a dialogue, to open new spaces for other things. Are there other ideas of how to put these lenses into practice that some others have? Self-reflection, maybe. Federico.
Thanks. I hope the sound is better. Please let me know. Well, a very basic thing that works for me is just going to the very basic idea of the phenomenon of regeneration. And normally I am amazed to see that in my body. When I get a small cut, or I'm with a flu, or I'm something that's happening, and the body has this knowledge and this process that cut in your hand after a few days is regenerated, is healed, is restored. Maybe it's even stronger than it was before if it's a flu or something that's attacking your immune system. So that's a marvelous and magical regenerative process. And we can also see that in nature, and we can also see that in society. When nature regenerates itself, a forest that has been degraded and it's just left alone for a few years, or a community that engages in a specific type of process. So what helps for me is just to go to that very, very basic idea of the capacity of a system to regenerate itself, to heal and restore and renew itself, and try to learn from that. Not so much from the ideas of our new gurus of regeneration that tell us that it should be one way or the other, or all should be taste-based, or all should be local, should be indigenous, or all should be whatever the ideas that may work. I'm not against them. They're very good at hypotheses of how to do regeneration, but they're only hypotheses. Put them into work, put them into practice, and see if that's actually helping out to the phenomenon, to the living and seeing phenomenon of regenerating a body or a system or a forest or a community. So that helps me, just going back to the very basics.
Thanks, Federico. I saw some thumbs up and some love for that in the chat. I think we'll go to Uma and then Javier.
So first of all, this session is like so amazing. I'm like seeing all these connections. So thank you so much for arranging it. And you know, the two icebergs that we saw at the beginning, that is really impactful for me because one of the things that I'm working on so I work for a hospital, and in terms of it's about providing equitable, culturally safe care to our diverse communities that are coming in, and also our diverse employee population. And there is often potential for conflict, and there is often conflict and misunderstandings, etc. So those two icebergs, it can I really look forward to using it as a tool to help people see themselves as, you know, how conflicts emerge because of all these different layers. And it's the same for providing culturally safe care and sort of effecting change in a very traditional Western, sorry, not traditional, but a Western style approach to medicine. And this one here with the 4 quadrants, I'm interested in exploring it a little bit more, but I can see some connections where, and often I find that people are unwilling to change or even entertain a different point of view. But when you take them through some of these models, it causes them to reflect. So regeneration in terms of regeneration of relationships. So, you know, addressing conflict, but coming out of it more in a positive way, regenerating relationships, and also regenerating health. From a healthcare perspective, I can see some connections there. So I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Uma. Javier.
Thank you. Wow, this is a very interesting conversation, and it's giving me, well, all these connections with many dimensions of what I've been doing in the last 3 decades. And actually, to me, the concept of regeneration, which is something I actually connected with not too long ago, is giving me more like a compass that, of course, we've all had those scaffolds to understand reality and to project ourselves towards the future. But it allows also to understand better how to actually work in practice to regenerate systems. I come from a field of policy that it's something that maybe one of the fields of policy that went most wrong in public policy in many places is policy related to drugs. And as you see, the impact on communities, on nature, on many dimensions of development, human rights has been terrible. So this idea of regeneration, it's really appealing to me. Of course, we know that we deal with huge difficulties to address, you know, these I would say cultural changes, and of course there's a cultural war and new narratives emerging, trying to make a better understanding of all this. But we have power issues, strong incentives, both from the illicit economies and also from corruption. You have, well, of course, spaces of comfort where people are resistant to change, fear to change. Those are elements that, in a way, we need to understand also how change happens. And that's another great field of work in which I've been trying to dip in order to push for this regeneration or these changes to happen. And we, along the way, we actually stepped into, I think, interesting political pivots that allowed us to talk to decision makers, talking about coherence of public policy. We actually took the whole idea of sustainable development and the Agenda 2030 as an element of, in a way, a consensus, a world political consensus on how progress should be for humanity. And of course, there are many things to talk about the 2030 agenda, but at the end, it was in a way a compass on how to take improvements for the whole system towards the future. This element of regeneration to me is something that adds more value to all that. And it applies not only to the system, which is a system that you go back 100 years ago and there was no war on drugs.
Sorry,
Javier.
Yeah. We just need to move forward. So if you can wrap it up pretty quickly. Sorry to do that, but we just have a few minutes.
Just to close it, I think it adds additional elements to those specific that comes from sustainable development and of course adds also additional elements to improve that added value for all the dimensions of interventions we do with our communities, with our territories, with our nature too.
Thank you.
Sorry about the long explanation.
Thank you, and thanks to you, Kim. Adrian, I think we're ready to move on straight to, if you're happy to share back. Really curious to hear what you've captured and how you share it with us. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, I've been listening and absorbing a lot, and I love the nuance of all the discussions. I've kind of leaned into three different pieces. My first, I wanted to kind of look at the frameworks and what are some of the strengths, what are some of the edges, but what emerged was more polarities, so kind of playing fields that we can look into. So the first one, I think multiple people named, and really Nazir, what you said of the canvas and not the whole frame speaks to me for how can we hold spaces that have a lot of complexity and nuance and also ambiguity. And then also I think Uma, you were speaking to this part of also making it accessible for people, right? So how can we use language that still resonates? And that feels like a polarity. So on the one hand side, having this depth, having this continuous inquiry, sitting with the questions, Hajar, what you mentioned of living into the questions and continue to question and interrogate these mindsets and things that are driving destruction in the world. So I think this piece around, how can we sit with nuance, and how can we, in that way, what Sound World said, avoid that regeneration turns into another catchphrase, right? Of this impulse to co-opt and to make things simple, to make things flat, which I think modernity is always doing. We're creating boxes and architectures instead of kind of living with the edges and the wildness, and countering this impulse that Uma and Federico, you've been naming, of this risk of becoming dogmatic. So how can we hold, this first piece is really around how can we continue to hold complexity and ambiguity while still keeping things accessible and inclusive, and making it also broad, not over intellectualizing or bringing it into this kind of elite of regeneration. I think there is a risk there, and there's possibility there. The second piece I wanted to name is I really loved about this process that has been so much deep sensing. I think particularly due to the framing of Hajar, who has brought us into these different layers and the different dimensions. I think it's been very very rich. And also there was a naming of embodiment, but just feeling into my own body after this discussion, I feel like most of the energy is still here. Looking at the models, the discussion, I feel like still a lot of the energy is here, and there's something about this process of we can talk about embodiment, but then there's another feeling if we actually do it, so how can we bring the body, our nervous system, into this space in a way that there is music, there is dance, there is silence, there is different kinds of modalities, and it's not just models and frameworks. And I want to speak to this again as a polarity, because those are also very useful, right? The discussions, the deep sense making, but how can we break that up? And maybe that's something for when we're continuing this process of developing the regenerative compass, that there can be more modalities that make sure that we stay grounded, we can connect to our hearts, we can slow down, we can go into relationship with each other beyond the concepts. And I think Federico has been naming the body, the flu, and Nazir has also been naming that we've been like focusing a lot on terms, right? So how can we move beyond the terms? How can we move into the feeling? How can we move into being an expression of the pieces that we're exploring? So that's the second piece I wanted to name. And then the third one, I feel like there has been a lot of naming of, you know, unlearning dominant system. Like there has been mention of modernity, of coloniality, all these systems of harm that ultimately sit, you know, at what is degenerative. I think it's these systems that perpetuate violence and destruction. And I feel like Hajar's framing of like hospicing with care has something deeply powerful, but there's still questions also of like, how do we really stand in solidarity with struggles that are very, very old against, you know, these systems of oppression, against white supremacy culture, against systemic racism. Like there is some parts of the language in the regenerative space that sometimes shies away from naming these harms and being in deep solidarity with the movements on the ground. And I think there is like also a questioning is like, is this digital process even, you know, not valid, but like, is that the space that we need? Because being here already says like, okay, you have a device, you have a stable internet connection. Accessing Miro is already, you know, you have some technological knowledge. So how can we be in solidarity with the movements that are on the ground if they can't really be present in the space in the first place? And I think that's very important as we like continue to explore and being very explicit about the harms, being explicit about the violence, and also standing in resistance to that. And I think what's been beautiful in the process is that has been naming of unlearning, of, you know, composting these degenerative mindsets and coloniality. But I think there is deeper layers we can move into. I think the last piece, so these were the three kind of observations, again, just picking up from what everybody has been sharing. I think a last piece, just looking at the process of like, this has been two sessions, right? And I think the intention was to create something together. And I think it's been great to see the team preparing and really holding this space. And I would love to see this evolving in a way that maybe now the stewards of this process can harvest what's been coming through and then kind of continue preparing new like a way to continue co-designing from here. So what are we co-creating and how does that become relevant to our networks, our communities, our ecosystems? And yeah, I think those are the three main pieces I wanted to share about the process, about what's been coming through. Again, thanks so much for sharing, and yeah, let's continue co-creating.
Thank you so much, Adrian. This was incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for the deep listening and deep reflection on what has been shared and summarizing it into these three key insights. I found that really helpful. We definitely have the intention to come back to this and process. The Miro board will stay open. We'll also have all of the chat saved and the session is recorded. So we'll go through and, to use the word you're using, Adrian, do some of that harvesting. We've done it as well for the first event that we ran with speakers on the 14th of May. That's also on the Miro board. So we'll do the same kind of deeper digestion of everything that was shared here and come back with next steps, how we can continue building on this process. Huge thank you again to you, Adrian, to you, Hajar, Kim, for this incredible Miro board, Eva for pulling all of this together, and of course to all of you for your time and your energy and your courage to bring all of this, to name it, to sit with the polarity, and to really, spend that time in community with us today. I will close it here. There will definitely be a follow-up with next steps.